The worst trip I've ever seen led to a broken sofa, shattered shards of bong glass floating in puddles of beer. And most importantly, it led to a person changing their life forever. Everywhere I go, people always want to know what's the worst trip I've ever seen. Not the worst trip I've had, but what was the single most intense psychedelic experience I've ever witnessed. Without hesitation, I immediately think about the time I was living in North Carolina, and my friend at the time had the most devastating and life-changing experience on SALVIA divinorum I've ever seen. Even wilder than I could even imagine. Why was I living in North Carolina? Fresh out of grad school, I was trying to make some money, so I found a job at a marketing company that made advertisements for fast food companies. Living in North Carolina was depressing. The place I lived was devoid of anything interesting, but I did work with some interesting people. Two interesting people, to be exact. One of them was named Julian, a graphic designer right out of college that also spun drum and bass in his free time. And the other was Owen, a guy that got his degree in rhetoric. Legit something I didn't know you could get a degree in, but he had one. The weekend would hit, Julian and Owen would come over to my place, smoke weed, drink beers, do other substances, and play Xbox on my giant new TV. This was the standard procedure after a long, monotonous week of work. And we did it without fail. Partying on the weekend at my place was the ritual. One particular week, Julian told me about a place around town that openly sold a substance called SALVIA divinorum over the counter. Directly translated, SALVIA divinorum means sage of the diviners, or more loosely translated, means heel of the seers. I didn't know this at the time, and I was just trying to find a new fun thing for us to try on the weekend. I've had experience with SALVIA divinorum before in graduate school, so I knew it elicits intense psychedelic visuals. A perfect psychopharmacological toy for us to try. After work on Friday, I drove to the place Julian told me that had the SALVIA divinorum. It was the kind of head shop where you walk in and you immediately have a sensory overload of bells clanging on the glass door. Loud sounds to alert the sole person working there to stop chilling in the back room and stand at the counter. Bongs of all sizes sat on peg wall shelves. Lamps inside glass counters showed off the array of pipes that were for sale, and most of them moderately priced. I scanned around the shop, and on the counter was a wooden-filled box with a colorful 1-gram pack of SALVIA divinorum, with the 50 times in bold letters on the label. 50x of SALVIA divinorum represents an incredible amount of salvia within a small pack. The cashier asked if I wanted anything else, but bro, I had everything I needed, so he put it in a small bag, and I was on my way back home with an extremely powerful indigenous psychedelic that I had a paper receipt for. Later that afternoon, Julian came by and wanted to try out the salvia. He's had it before, so he understood the process. No heavy foods before, have the right mindset going in, get somewhere comfy, smoke it, preferably through a water bong, take deep puffs, close your eyes, and let go. And that's exactly what he did. A salvia trip only lasts a few minutes. It's intense and short. And Julian tripped like a person that had an ample amount of experience with psychedelics, but also a healthy respect of the substance's powerful consciousness modulating abilities. Owen, on the other hand, the guy that majored in rhetoric, he did not have the same respect for this powerful psychedelic. About an hour after Julian's salvia trip, Owen came by. Julian and I discussed giving Owen an ample amount of caution about the strength of salvia and the intensity of the trip. Before he arrived, we packed a bowl of salvia on top of a small amount of cannabis. The idea was we were going to carefully light 1/3 of the bowl and have a decent shared salvia experience together. When Owen sat down on my IKEA sofa, Julian began explaining the game plan of how salvia may look like really low quality weed, but that it has a unique psychoactive potential and that he should relax his mind for a bit before smoking it. All this advice for Owen, and it swiftly went into one ear and out the other. He interrupted Julian and insisted he's done shrooms many times before and this little bit was nothing. And that game plan we had, the one where we were only going to roast 1/3 of the bowl and then pass it along to the next person, it completely fell through. And it fell through when Owen grabbed the bong, pulled out the torch lighter, and ripped the entire bowl. Enough salvia for 3 people. Julie and I are shocked at what's happening. We look at each other with a recognition that we're collectively bracing ourselves for a psychological hurricane that's going to take place inside my living room. Owen puts the bong down, tosses the torch lighter next to it, lays back on the sofa with a slight smirk on his face as if to let us know that he won't be affected by any of this salvia stuff in the least. But man, was he wrong? Owen was fine on the sofa until he wasn't fine. About 15 seconds in, he slowly slithers off the sofa onto the floor and begins writhing and crawling with his arms and his legs. His extremities were weirdly contorted as if he was crawling on the ground like a zombie-infected mongoose. As Owen was crawling on the ground on all fours, Julian and I just looked at each other, absolutely clueless on how to respond to any of this behavior. Suddenly, Owen stood up from his crawl, and when he did, the edge of his shoulder slammed into my coffee table, flipping it and everything on top over. My new bong, now just scattered collections of shards and pieces. Since Owen was still walking around, Julian swept up all the mess in a pile and put it under the sofa as quickly as he could. I was observing Owen aimlessly wandering my living room. His arms were outstretched, like a classic zombie from Halloween, and his outstretched arms were reaching towards my new wall-mounted TV. And bro, I just got that TV. First my bong, then my coffee table. There's no way this guy's taking out my TV. I rushed to get in between him and the TV, using my body as a barrier. And surprisingly, it worked. Like a human pinball, Owen bounced off me and back in the opposite direction towards my sofa. But when his legs made contact with the side of my table, he launched himself directly on the seat cushion like some atomic butt drop. When he did this, the entire sofa cracked in half. Then somehow, Owen popped right back up and started once again wandering around my now post-apocalyptic living room. He started repeatedly whispering, "Help me, help me, help me." Eventually those whispers begin to grow into loud whimpers. "Help me, help me, help me." Those whimpers grew into full-blown screams. He ran to the corner of my hallway, got into a fetal position, and started yelling, "Help me, help me, help me," at the top of his lungs at 1 a.m. near my door. What do you do when a person is crying out for help due to a state of consciousness that exists entirely inside one's head? At the time, I had no idea. However, I thought if Owen could connect a tactile feeling with this world, his base reality, perhaps I could calm him down a bit. I kneeled down a bit and placed my arm for him to hold. He held it tight. I think it actually helped out. The screams subsided. Now all Owen was doing was sobbing in the corner. As Owen was grasping onto my arm, I looked back and locked eyes with Julian. He was shaking his head in disbelief. We thought it was going to be a chill night with the boys. Now nearly everything that could be broken was now broken, including Owen's entire psyche. As suddenly as Owen started crying, he stopped, stood up, and began fidgeting with a lock on my door, saying, "I need to get out of here." My door was locked, and it was a classic American lock, so there's a lock chain, a lock latch, and a turn lock, and all of them were secured. I believe that if Owen could handle a small cognitive puzzle like figuring out how all these locks work and unlocking them, he would be mentally back in this world and would be capable of regulating his emotions and behavior. That was the idea, but what happened is Owen immediately opened the locks without hesitation and ran outside at night in the cold, barefoot. Julian chased after him, and I stood inside, mostly because I was emotionally spent. I'm not sure what happened to Owen while he was walking around barefoot outside, but within a few minutes, Julian and Owen came back in my apartment, tears still streaming from Owen's face. But effectively, he was back. He looked around and questioned whether he was the cause of all this destruction. I clearly said yes and told him just to sit down on the other sofa that wasn't broken and to relax while he wiped his eyes. Once he calmed down, I asked him the obvious question we all wanted to know. What did you see in your trip? And he told me. Owen said one moment he was inside my living room taking a hit from a bong, and then instantly he was transported to a giant open field filled with tall green grass and corn stalks. He was using his arms to navigate through this field, pushing aside these massive blades of grass, trying to find some clearing in the field. I deduced this must have been the moment when he was wandering through my living room with his arms outstretched like a zombie. After roaming in the field for a bit, he found a clearing and started walking down this long stone-paved road. No real direction, it just felt like he needed to go down this path. Owen told me he continued to walk, and all of a sudden, he heard a loud boom come from the sky, like the sound of 1,000 trumpets, all going off at the same time. He looked up and saw this configuration of biblical figures and Christian iconography fill an empty void in the sky. Owen took this Christian religious imagery as an apocalyptic message, one that told him the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were on their way to end the world. And as a Christian, Owen was not ready for the end of the world. Armageddon was just not in his cards that night. God was taking him, and he didn't have time to repent for his sins, since that's the Christian way of doing things. Sheer, unbridled, violent panicking, because Owen thought he wasn't right with God. And that is the point where he flipped out in panic. So how did Owen integrate this trip into his life? Before his SALVIA experience, Owen was a guy that would try or smoke anything anyone ever handed to him. The first person to roll and spark a blunt. However, after the experience, he quit everything cold turkey. He was no longer the chatty person that would visit everyone's desks at work. Owen pulled back and became socially unavailable. About 3 weeks after his trip, he announced that he was leaving his job and moving to the deep south, to the heart of Alabama, in order to build a family. I thought that was the last time I would have ever heard from Owen. But some time passed, and it was the pandemic, and I got a call from Owen. In short, ever since that experience, he became a hard right-wing conservative and placed his Christian faith at the forefront of his life. He became a staunch MAGA supporter, and when I talked to him over the phone, he was trying to get me to believe one of these mini cuckoo COVID conspiracy theories. I think it was the one where they put microchips inside the vaccine. So there you have it. A very easygoing liberal guy turned to a hard right-wing conservative. From perhaps the most intense psychedelic trip of his entire life. And that's the end of this episode of Deep Trippin'. Hope you enjoyed this story of another intense psychedelic trip. Don't forget to join my Patreon to get exclusives like show notes from each episode. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. Guys, I need subscribers. Leave a comment, I read all of them, and follow on X, TikTok, and Instagram, all at Tipado. Thank you for watching Deep Trippin'.